Good evening. Today is Tuesday, March the 15th, 2011, and I would like to speak to you today about my thoughts on nuclear power and the situation that is ongoing in Japan. Now, when you watch MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News, they will always have lobbyists on for nuclear power. Whether it be politicians or spokespeople from the NRC, they will have people on who will insist how safe nuclear power is in the United States and how what's happening in Japan could never happen over here. I think otherwise. Now, before we get into the huge downfalls of nuclear power, I'm going to quickly explain to you how nuclear power plants work. Nuclear power plants are powered by uranium in a process known as fission. Instead of burning fossil fuels like other plants do, a nuclear power plant uses the fission process to split uranium atoms to create a powerful heat energy that boils water. The only byproduct you see is water vapor, and most of the time, the electricity creation process at a nuclear power plant is very clean. But there are major downfalls to utilizing nuclear power, and here are just some of them. The first one is the large amount of nuclear waste that comes from nuclear power plants, and you never hear lobbyists speaking about this. The fuel rods in nuclear reactors eventually have to be replaced, and those spent fuel rods are still highly radioactive for thousands of years. So this nuclear waste has to be disposed of, and what they do is they store nuclear waste in caves and mountains. For example, the Yucca Mountain in Nevada is where they store a lot of nuclear waste to keep the harmful radiation away from people. But nuclear waste is dangerous, and think about it, that's another chance for human error. What happens if that nuclear waste gets damaged while it's being transported to the mountain or cave? That could be another nuclear disaster within itself. And of course, the most severe drawback to nuclear power is the risk that there could be a nuclear meltdown at any of these plants. This has happened in recent history before. It happened at Chernobyl in the Ukraine, and it has happened at 3 Mile Island in the United States. What a nuclear meltdown is the nuclear fuel assemblies in the reactor core overheat and melt. Like in Japan at the moment, they are actually pumping seawater into the reactor cores to substitute the fact that the actual coolant systems for their nuclear power plants have failed. And if they don't succeed, what will happen is the fuel rods will actually get so hot that they will melt, and when they melt, radioactive materials can be spread for very long distances and can have cataclysmic consequences. For example, after the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, the land around Chernobyl is uninhabitable now for thousands of years, and there was a spike in thyroid cancer cases after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster happened. Now, the scariest thing about Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island is that both of those were caused by human error. It wasn't an earthquake, it was not a tsunami, it wasn't an act of God. It was human error that caused the meltdown at Chernobyl and the partial meltdown at 3 Mile Island. Now let's go back to Japan and talk about what those poor people are going through right now with their nuclear crisis. That was not human error. That was caused by a 9.0 magnitude earthquake and a giant tsunami afterwards that caused all the backup systems at their nuclear power plants to fail. And when you watch news stations like CNN and MSNBC interview lobbyists, they say that this could never happen over here, that every single plant is designed to handle the biggest earthquake that was ever recorded in the area that it was placed. What? The best we can do is give like 100 to 200 year guesstimate of when an area might get another earthquake, and you're basing how stable a nuclear power plant should be built because you're assuming that the area it was placed cannot get a larger earthquake than the previous one recorded? Are you insane? And of course, it always comes down to money. People rather build a nuclear power plant that could just handle a 7.0 magnitude earthquake as opposed to a 10.0 magnitude earthquake because it's cheaper. Well, let me ask you a question. If, God forbid, that 7.0 magnitude capable nuclear plant gets rocked with a 10.0 magnitude earthquake, and because of that, a nuclear meltdown happens and millions of people become sick and die, do you think the people affected by that nuclear meltdown are just going to let it slide because you assumed you didn't have to spend the extra money to fortify the nuclear power plant? Now, I do understand I was going off topic a little bit, but I was making a point. Nuclear power is not our future. I understand the United States wants to get away from oil, from natural gas, from coal, because all of those type of power plants have huge drawbacks as well. They are very detrimental to the environment, and they cost us a lot of money. And even though nuclear power can be cleaner and more efficient, the cataclysmic consequences that come along with nuclear power are far too dangerous. This world needs to work together to find a better solution. This is Rich of The Verdict. My prayers and thoughts are with Japan. Thank you for listening.